Today I'm just going to talk a little bit more about my personal journey to give you an idea of where I've come from. 5 principles of good design, integrating in the idea that sustainability will eventually just become good design. And the clash of cultures, how there's some conflict with sustainability and design between tradition and new technologies, and where the industry is headed. So, as John said that he is an engineer, I actually come from a background in, surprisingly, sewage sludge. I studied the health-related incidences revolving around the land application of sewage sludge, and also the organic contaminants that we were finding, which was an eye-opening experience for me when I was doing the work, because, you know, actually, surprisingly, 65% of this stuff actually gets reapplied onto our land, and it's only tested for 9 inorganics and 2 bacteria. And we were seeing all of these people getting sick that had sludge being reapplied, and we were finding toxic organic contaminants, everything from brominated diphenyl ethers that we put on to our textiles or on furniture, for flame retardants, to triclosan that we find in our toothpastes. And in many cases, they were exceeding Superfund sites. So it's as if you truck some stuff into a Superfund, it would go, and we were yet applying this onto our land, and there was no federal regulations. So when I was learning about it, I was finding about all of this consumer product that we make this stuff with, and it troubled me. The other thing that I had been focused on is, this is a great photo by Thomas Shahan, bugs. I love insects. It was something that fascinated me as a young girl, and still fascinates me today. This was actually a week and a half ago where I got to feel what it was like to put hundreds of honeybees on the bare skin. So it was a really unique experience to get up close and personal with the little guys in life that really make our economy move. I did realize, however, though, that if I were to just work in sewage sludge or insects, that I would probably only have an audience of 1. I don't think that it interests a lot of people, but I was struggling with the idea that how can I actually get environmental issues out to a wider audience. So I wanted to go into an industry that was the furthest away that I could possibly be from environment. And that, to me, was this woman, Anna Wintour. So the fashion industry itself was a great mediagenic tool. It helps tell a story. But as I was learning, again, as I was learning about the studies, I realized that it wasn't so unlike sewage sludge or insects. That the things that I was learning about, the toxins that we were putting into the environment, actually connected the social issues of how we make a garment, actually connected in so many different ways. So I wasn't as clever as I thought I was in the beginning, because I was like, oh, wow, 2 disparate interests. But it actually really informed my journey going forward. And I feel like we have to kind of step outside our realms of what we're comfortable with, and go into places that with people who don't look or act or think like us, to actually build the environmental movement outwards. And if you are entomologically challenged, this is dung beetles, and they're known for pushing poop up a hill. And I love this photo. I don't even know where I found it, but it's clever because they are pushing the earth up the hill, and I do believe that we have to get our hands dirty. We have to challenge ourselves. And for me, I'll talk a little bit about design, but I have to tell you that I just fooled you, because I am also going to bring sewage sludge and insects back into the story. So the 5 principles of good design, what I believe is good design is invisible. And we learned this. went out and created a more environmentally preferable shoe line with Payless. And we didn't want to make it look or feel or act any differently than another shoe. We just wanted to make it look like another shoe that you would be able to wear. And so it shouldn't cry out or scream out, I'm green, I'm a burlap sack, I'm a hemp sandal. It wants to look and feel like it's invisible. It solves problems. You know, in many ways, we've created design, and there's certain externalities where it creates these problems. It creates waste. It creates deforestation. But now we see companies who are looking and saying, wow, you know, this whole area has been deforested. How can we actually build design to help solve that and be part of the solution, to be restorative rather than being reactive to the damage that we are creating? Good design considers life cycle, the whole idea from moving from cradle to grave to cradle to grave to cradle to cradle, and considering the whole life cycle of a product, even when we actually have it in our homes. It's transparent. There's definite move towards transparency, and even companies who say, you know what, we don't actually have it right. We don't have it 100%, and this is why. And then good design, and you've probably heard this in some of the other talks earlier in the week, is it mimics nature. And this is one of the ones that most fascinates me, because it really translates back into that passion, that what moves me, and that's back into the science field, looking to nature for answers and for design. So a little bit of what, you know, as we're moving forward in this idea of what sustainability means, and what does sustainability mean to an industry such as the apparel and textiles industry, you see some things coming head to head. And there's usually two schools of thoughts, and they're now starting to intersect. And I'm just going to look at silk production, for instance, in with the tradition and with the technology. So traditionally, silk production comes from the Bombyx mori, which is the silkworm. So basically what they do is they just stuff these silkworms with white mulberry leaves. They turn cocoons, and oftentimes these get tossed into a boiler. The silkworm actually doesn't even emerge. They toss it into a boiler, and they remove the silk, and sometimes there's actually even a market to actually eat the silkworm that has been boiled. Doesn't actually happen here, but there is a whole movement of like wild and pea silk, where the silkworm is actually able to emerge as a moth, but a proteolytic enzyme actually shortens the thread. So oftentimes they'll just end up boiling the silkworm, turns it into yarn. The whole cultural element. There's many cultures within Cambodia, within India, that actually, you know, harvest this thread, they hand loom it, and this is actually some of the material that we have on the new Source for Style site, and they actually create beautiful textile out of it. However, this is coming head to head with a whole other level of silk production, and that's on the more technological side. This is a golden orb weaver. Again, another photo by Thomas Shahan, who gets really up close and personal with insects. This is one of the most well-studied insects, I would have to say, I actually misspoke there. It's not an insect. It's an arthropod. This is one of the most well-studied arthropods within science, and it's largely because of their silk production. This is an arachnid that was found 165 million years ago, just a little bit before orb weaving started. So the spider fibers are quite interesting. They actually have 6 to 7 glands. And the one that we're going to concentrate a little bit more on is this drag line, which is called, it's from the major ampullate. So this is the kind of thing, did you ever run, you know, on a trail, and all of a sudden you got like some sticky spider webs in your face, and it's like caught in your hat, and it's in your mouth and everything? That's usually what you're running through, is this drag line. It's the one that, you know, when you see the spider coming down, that's what you're seeing. Now, that fabric, or that fiber, is really interesting to designers, and I'll tell you why. It is 6 times stronger than man-made steel by weight. 6 times stronger. So as a scientist, you look at that and you're like, that's really interesting. Now, you necessarily wouldn't design with spider silk, except in this case. This is actually housed in the American Museum of Natural History. This is a cloak that was designed by Madagascar artisans by milking 1 million golden orb weave spiders. Now that's kind of unusual. And I wouldn't want to be on the other end of the spider milking it, which is also called reeling. But it does make you wonder that this is actually possible to design. And what's interesting about the way that spider silk is actually chemically structured is that it's made with glycine and alanine. It's principally an amino acid chain. And why this biologically and evolutionarily makes sense is that glycine and alanine are the smallest of the amino acids, which means they pack tightly, which makes it for sleek sailing on the way down when you're dropping your dragline, Spider-Man. And the way that they're actually structured, what makes them so tensile and elastic is that they have these like beta sheets, and all these little squiggly lines that you see as like a kid with a pen that just had a field day. That actually gives it its elasticity. So it has these hydrogen bonds that actually give it that ability to stretch and to move and give it that tensile strength. This is actually what it looks like more close. It's, again, principally glycine and alanine. It has serenine, tyrosine, a number of others. But I want to show you this chemical structure in case there's anybody who's nerding it out back there. All right, we got a hand. Okay. And I know there was one woman in the audience who knows, because I was talking about this before, so don't scream it out. But what is the one synthetic fabric that is the closest to this chemical structure? Kevlar. Very good. I didn't even have to go through some of the things. Kevlar. Kevlar has a very similar chemical structure. If you know Kevlar, it's actually used in bulletproof vests. There's some different synthetic materials that we've actually developed for, shoes, so that when you're like stepping, you're not stepping on a nail, and it kind of gives that sense of a bounce and protection for your foot. But the crazy thing about Kevlar is that, and like with most synthetic materials, is that it uses intense energy and pressure and heat, and then it's extruded out a spinneret, and then dried and drawed, and again uses all that energy. Yet, spider silk is created in an aqueous solution at body temperature. So, here we are making a material that is actually not even as superior than spider silk. DuPont came out with Kevlar back in the 1960s. So what is it that we can actually take and learn from the environment? This is a great graph, so I'm going to just spend a little bit of time on this. Nephila dragline silk, that's the golden orb weaver. You see the strength in gigapascals is 1.3. So Kevlar has a greater strength. But then look at the elasticity, 40 to 5. And then the energy to break is ginormous. And then if you look at Bombyx mori, which is the traditional silk that your silk blouses would be, it's 0.5, 15, 6 times 10 to the 4th power. Not even as interesting. But I will talk a little bit about now the biomechanics and the technology of how this is actually changing. So if you just go to this slide, there's been a lot of advances in silk technology. One is we talked about the artificial reeling of the spider. So depending on how fast or how slow that you actually reel the silk, you could actually change the elasticity and the strength. So it's as if it's like the spider knows how to do that themselves, but we can actually help manipulate that. Artificial reeling, you could also do it with the silkworm. They found that. Metal-enhanced silk via atomic layer deposition. This is kind of cool. Atomic layer deposition is not traditionally used in design, but what happens is they actually spray a layer of zinc or aluminum, and this is just scientists were just looking at this last year, spray a level of zinc and aluminum on the spider silk, And actually what happens, or what they actually think happens, is those hydrogen bonds, those little black squiggly lines, are actually turning into covalent bonds from the metal. And it's making spider silk 10 times stronger than what it is. Now the elasticity goes down, but look at the number. If it's 10 times stronger than what that is, we're actually onto something. And it's lightweight, and it moves well, and it's strong. And that's interesting. That's interesting to designers, because then you're approaching that level of being commercially viable to be using in whether it's cars, or whether it's in shoes, or whether it's in industrial applications. And then this kind of happened, and it maybe happened a little bit too soon, and it got a lot of press, but recombinant DNA technology, they actually devised a way to create the silk protein that you see from a golden orb weaver in the udders of a goat. And they have a number of these biotech goats up in Canada, and the company actually went out of business. I don't think they could find enough applications, or they probably freaked a little bit people out about these goats are shooting spider webs out of their udders. But the reality is they actually found a way to actually produce it, more I would say like mass produce it, rather than having to pull a spider web out of a arachnid's bum. So, this is just to give you a little highlight and excitement about like what's actually happening in the sustainability world in design. Not necessarily on, hey guys, like look at the cool shoes I'm wearing, but more like a little bit behind the scenes of what the scientists are looking at, and the future applications that we could possibly have, and the way that sustainability is being discussed within the industry. So I guess the lesson to learn from that is that good design does take an open approach to sustainability. And for me in this industry, that's more of what I'd like to concentrate on. But it's hard because you kind of always get pulled back into it, and people start talking about compliance and metrics and ways to be able to compare different materials with one another. And just very quickly in the last minute or so, I'm just going to give you an indication of how it's being discussed currently within the industry. So the idea of, how do we compare unlike materials with one another, and using, more of a life cycle approach, using some past research, and taking a look at parameters such as greenhouse gas emissions to energy input to land use. How do we measure that, and how do we actually rank it? Now, this doesn't go as far. This is done by a nonprofit organization called Made By out in the Netherlands and the UK that's actually gathering up a lot of steam. Some of our brands out here have actually signed up with their program. I work with Made By to a certain degree, but there's a lot of this metric data work happening. Nike talked a little bit about it. The outdoor industry associations, their eco working group, are working on these things. But it's a way to actually inform us of, how do materials differ from one another. So again, this is Made By. They actually started separating materials into classes by taking some of the scientific data and saying, how is recycled cotton better than regular cotton? Is organic cotton better than polyester? And they started putting these in silos. Now, there's benefits and there's curses for doing something like this, because if you're a designer and you're actually kind of using this as a method, there's not necessarily any way for you to improve within the class. So you could always start looking at it into a deeper degree, like I'm going to use rain-fed versus irrigated cotton. So, but it actually does, these are the steps that we're actually taking to look at how environmental sustainability relates to what we design and what we wear. And I'll just leave it at this. This is more of the broader approach that we're approaching at Source for Style, which is a business-to-business online marketplace to connect designers with more sustainable sources. And we're just looking at these ideas of more environmentally preferable material, whether that's biopolymers, whether it's organic cotton versus conventional cotton, environmental processes, so ones that are more energy efficient, more water efficient, fair labor and fair trade, again, bringing back some stuff that I don't think that we always discuss, but really preserving that indigenous culture or that tradition in society. It often gets left off the table when we talk about environmental issues, and there's so much more value add there because it is culturally relevant. And so that was more socially compliant, and then the handmade and traditional, which is more culturally relevant. So thank you guys very much. I think that's my time. I'm here afterwards if you have any questions or if you want to nerd it out about sewage, sludge, and insects a little bit more. Thanks.